Standing in the shadow of a megalithic monument like Stonehenge or the Great Pyramid, it's impossible not to feel a rush of awe and a burning question. How did ancient people, without the benefit of modern machinery, move and shape these colossal stones with such precision? The answer lies not in brute force, but in the quiet genius of tools without teeth, simple, unassuming instruments that became the unsung heroes of engineering marvels we still struggle to replicate today. This is the story of the silent engineers, the forgotten craftsmen whose ingenuity defied the limits of their time and left behind mysteries that whisper to us across millennia. Picture this, a workforce without cranes, without steel, without even the wheel in some cases, yet capable of lifting stones heavier than elephants and fitting them together so tightly you couldn't slide a razor blade between them. These weren't miracles, they were masterclasses in problem solving, born from observation, experimentation, and an intimate understanding of materials. The tools they used, ropes, levers, ramps, even water, were humble, but in the hands of these early innovators, they became instruments of extraordinary power. What's even more astonishing, many of their techniques have been lost to time, buried under layers of history, leaving us to piece together their secrets like detectives reconstructing an ancient blueprint. This journey isn't just about solving a puzzle, it's about rediscovering a lost chapter of human brilliance. These builders didn't just stack stones, they defied gravity, outsmarted friction, and turned the impossible into the ordinary. And as we peel back the layers of their methods, we'll uncover something even more profound, a testament to what humans can achieve when creativity meets necessity. So let's step into their world where every rock tells a story, and every tool, no matter how simple, holds the key to unlocking the past. By the end, you'll never look at these ancient monuments the same way again. Consider the sheer enormity of the task before these ancient builders. We're talking about stones weighing upwards of 50 tons, some as heavy as small houses hauled across miles of uneven terrain, then lifted into place with nothing but human muscle and rudimentary tools. No pulleys, no hydraulics, no diamond-tipped drills, just wood, stone, rope, and an almost unimaginable amount of patience. The real head-scratcher, many of these megaliths were shaped and fitted with such precision that modern engineers still debate how it was possible without metal implements. Take the granite blocks of Egypt's pyramids, for instance. These stones were quarried from bedrock using nothing more than dolerite pounders, rounded rocks harder than granite, to painstakingly peck away at the stone grain by grain. No saws with jagged teeth, no power tools belching smoke, just relentless tapping that must have taken weeks to carve out a single block. Then there's the transportation puzzle. How do you move a 2-story tall obelisk across the desert? The answer might lie in something as simple as wet sand. Experiments have shown that dragging sleds over dampened terrain reduces friction by half, turning an impossible haul into a manageable slog. But the true marvel comes in the assembly. At sites like Sacsayhuaman in Peru, stones weighing hundreds of tons are locked together in jigsaw-like patterns, their edges beveled and notched with such accuracy that they've withstood earthquakes for centuries. The secret, a technique called ashlar masonry, where stones were trial-fitted using wooden molds, then painstakingly adjusted with abrasives like sand until they clicked into place like pieces of a 3-dimensional puzzle. No chisels with sharp teeth here, just the gradual wearing away of stone against stone, guided by hands that understood material properties in ways we're only beginning to appreciate. What emerges from these examples isn't just a story of primitive technology, but a revelation about human ingenuity. These builders didn't have our tools, but they had something perhaps more valuable, an intimate dialogue with their materials. They knew how wood flexed under tension, how stone fractured along natural lines, how leverage could turn a dozen workers into a human crane. Every scratch mark on these ancient stones is a love letter to problem solving, written in a language we're still learning to read. One of the most elegant solutions ancient builders devised for moving massive stones wasn't about sheer strength, it was about outsmarting weight itself. By harnessing the principles of leverage and counterbalance, they turned back-breaking labor into a carefully orchestrated dance between force and finesse. Imagine a single worker lifting a stone heavier than an elephant, not with muscle alone, but by placing a wooden beam beneath it and pressing down on the opposite end. That's the magic of the lever, a tool so simple yet so transformative that it became the cornerstone of megalithic engineering. The real genius lay in how these builders scaled this principle. In Egypt, archaeologists have found evidence of massive lever systems used to position the precise outer casing stones of the pyramids. Workers would have rigged long timbers as pivots, using shorter beams as adjustable fulcrums to incrementally nudge stones upward, almost like climbing a staircase one careful step at a time. But the true masterstroke, counterweights, by suspending baskets filled with sand or smaller stones on the opposite end of the lever, they created a natural balance, allowing a small team to control movements that would otherwise require hundreds. Halfway across the world, the Inca took this concept even further. At Ollantaytambo in Peru, the ruins reveal how workers transported 60-ton granite slabs from quarries high in the mountains down to valley construction sites. Here, they likely used a combination of lever systems and massive earthen ramps, shifting stones millimeter by millimeter while counterweights kept them stable on steep inclines. What's remarkable is how these techniques weren't just practical, they were adaptable. The same principles applied whether fitting multi-ton blocks into fortress walls or adjusting the angle of a single sacred stone by fractions of a degree. These methods reveal something profound about ancient problem solving. They didn't fight physics, they collaborated with it. Every fulcrum point, every counterweight, was a conversation between human ingenuity and natural forces. And while we might now have cranes and hydraulics, the core idea remains unchanged. Sometimes the most powerful tools aren't the ones that force nature into submission, but those that listen to its whispers and work in harmony. The next time you see a megalithic wonder, look closer. Those perfect seams between stones, they weren't just cut, they were coaxed into place, one carefully calculated pivot at a time. While levers and counterweights solved the puzzle of vertical movement, ancient builders faced an equally daunting challenge: how to transport megaliths horizontally across miles of rugged terrain. Their solution, a surprisingly simple yet devastatingly effective combination of logs and sledges. Picture teams of workers carefully laying down a path of felled tree trunks, then sliding massive stone blocks atop wooden sledges that rolled across this makeshift trackway. Each time the sledge reached the end of the log path, the rear logs were picked up and repositioned to the front, creating a continuous rolling road that turned impossible hauls into manageable journeys. The archaeological record brims with evidence of this method. At Lebanon's Baalbek, home to some of the largest cut stones in history, including the 900-ton stone of the pregnant woman, researchers found parallel grooves in ancient quarry floors matching the width of sledges. Even more telling are the megalithic transport paths on Easter Island, where the famous Moai statues were moved up to 11 miles from quarries to ceremonial platforms. Here, the combination of log rollers and carved wooden sledges left distinct wear patterns in the soil, preserved like fossilized fingerprints of an ancient workflow. But the real stroke of genius was in the details. Builders didn't just drag stones blindly, they optimized every aspect of the process. In Egypt, tomb paintings depict workers pouring liquid in front of sledges, likely water or oil to reduce friction. Experimental archaeologists have proven that wetting the sand or logs could cut pulling forces by half, turning what we'd assume was backbreaking labor into a coordinated, almost rhythmic operation. Meanwhile, in Japan's Asuka region, where 200-ton stones were transported for imperial tombs, teams likely used a hybrid system, sledges for flat stretches and log rollers for inclines, adjusting techniques to the landscape's demand. What's often overlooked is how these methods required more than brute strength. They demanded an orchestra of coordination. Moving a single megalith might involve hundreds of workers pulling ropes in unison, guided by rhythm keepers beating drums or chanting to synchronize efforts. The logistics were staggering, calculating the right number of logs to prevent buckling, ensuring sledges didn't veer off course, even accounting for how wood properties changed with temperature and humidity. This wasn't just transportation, it was applied physics on a colossal scale. Perhaps most humbling is realizing these primitive techniques could outperform modern machinery in certain scenarios. When a team tried to replicate Easter Island's Moai transport with cranes and trucks, they found the statue's delicate bases cracked under concentrated pressure, something that never happened during ancient log rolling, where weight distribution was perfectly balanced. It's a reminder that sometimes the most advanced solution isn't the one with the most moving parts, but the one that listens closest to nature's quiet wisdom. The next time you see a photograph of these transported stones, look beyond their size. What you're really seeing is a masterpiece of collective human intelligence, written in the language of rolling logs and polished sled tracks. Now imagine an entire stone moving system where the hardest work wasn't done by people at all, but by water itself. While logs and sledges conquered land transport, some of history's most massive stones may have hitched rides on nature's original highway, rivers and canals. This isn't just speculation. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence that ancient engineers turned water into their silent collaborator, using buoyancy to achieve what would otherwise be unimaginable. Take Easter Island's iconic Moai statues, for instance. These towering figures, some weighing over 80 tons, were carved from volcanic rock inland, then transported across the island to coastal platforms. For decades, researchers assumed they were dragged on sledges, but recent experiments revealed something far more elegant. When replicas were wrapped in rope harnesses and partially submerged in water, teams found they could walk the statues upright with minimal effort, using the water's buoyancy to offset their weight. The technique mirrored local oral traditions that described the Moai moving themselves to their final positions, a clue hidden in plain sight, the real stroke of genius. Ancient builders didn't just use water as a passive aider, they engineered entire landscapes around it. In Egypt, traces of canals have been detected near the Giza Plateau, suggesting stones from distant quarries might have floated much of their journey during the Nile's annual floods. Picture this: granite blocks loaded onto barges, their weight neutralized by the water beneath them, then guided through man-made channels that brought them within striking distance of the pyramids. Even more remarkably, at Cambodia's Angkor Wat, researchers found sandstone blocks, some weighing 1.5 tons, were likely floated down the Siem Reap River on bamboo rafts, a method still used by local stonemasons today. But water's role went beyond mere transportation. At Peru's Ollantaytambo, where pink granite blocks were hauled up steep mountainsides, archaeologists discovered intricate systems of reservoirs and channels. These weren't just for drinking, they may have served as hydraulic counterweights. By filling and emptying water-filled bags or containers, builders could have created adjustable ballast to stabilize stones during lifts, turning a mountain slope into a giant scale. Similar techniques appear in ancient Chinese texts describing the movement of colossal jade blocks, where water-filled trenches acted as shock absorbers during precise positioning. What makes these water-based methods so extraordinary is their quiet efficiency. Unlike grinding sledges or straining ropes, floating stones required almost no friction to overcome. A single barge pulled by a small crew could transport what would take hundreds dragging on land, and the evidence is often right beneath our feet, literally. Sediment layers near megalithic sites frequently show signs of temporary waterways, smoothed stones, artificial banks, even ancient dock remnants. These subtle fingerprints suggest that for every stone monument we marvel at today, there might have been an invisible aquatic highway that made it possible. The lesson here transcends archaeology. These builders didn't just adapt to their environment, they conversed with it, recognizing that water wasn't an obstacle but a partner. In an age before fuel-powered cranes, they harnessed physics with such intimacy that their solutions feel less like engineering and more like poetry. So the next time you see a Moe's inscrutable gaze or run your hand along the base of a pyramid block, remember, these stones might not have just been dragged into place. They could have sailed. Among all the tools that shaped the ancient world, none were more transformative than the humble ramp, a sloping pathway that turned impossible heights into manageable climbs. While levers conquered weight and sledges conquered distance, ramps provided the key to vertical conquest, allowing builders to defy gravity one carefully calculated inch at a time. The Great Pyramid of Giza alone required the placement of 2.3 million stone blocks, some weighing as much as 15 tons, at heights exceeding 480 feet. Without ramps, this would have been as unthinkable as stacking pebbles to the moon. Archaeologists have identified at least 3 distinct ramp designs that revolutionized construction. The simplest were straight ramps, massive earthen causeways built at a gentle incline, often reinforced with mud brick or wooden planks to prevent slippage. Traces of these have been found radiating outward from pyramid bases like spokes on a wheel, allowing teams to drag stones upward in a direct but labor-intensive path. Yet as pyramids grew taller, straight ramps became impractical. Imagine a ramp to the pyramid's peak. It would have required more material than the pyramid itself, stretching nearly a mile in length at a 10% grade. Enter the zigzag ramp, a smarter, steeper alternative that clung to one face of the pyramid, switching back like a mountain road. This design drastically reduced the volume of construction material needed. At the bent pyramid in Dosha, visible remnants of such a ramp still snake up its northern side, preserving the ancient builder's trial and error approach. But the real masterpiece was the spiral ramp, a corkscrewing pathway that wrapped around the pyramid's exterior, allowing stones to be moved upward in a continuous, space-saving loop. French architect Jean-Pierre Houdon's laser scans of the Great Pyramid revealed internal voids consistent with a spiral ramp's predicted path, while ancient graffiti inside hidden chambers depicts workers hauling blocks along curved trajectories. What's often overlooked is how these ramps were more than just physical structures, they were mathematical marvels. Builders understood that the ideal incline balanced effort against stability. Too steep and stones would tumble backward, too shallow, and the ramp would collapse under its own length. The Egyptians likely used a simple but ingenious tool called a merkit, a plumb line with a sighting notch, to calculate angles with precision. ensuring each section of ramp maintained a consistent slope of roughly 7 to 8 degrees. Meanwhile, at Teotihuacan in Mexico, builders employed a different trick. Their ramps incorporated stepped sections, creating a staircase effect that reduced slippage for workers hauling volcanic stone uphill. The true brilliance of these ramp systems lay in their adaptability. At sites like Carol in Peru, one of the oldest cities in the Americas, archaeologists found ramps lined with woven reed mats, a clever solution that prevented sand from shifting underfoot. In China's Yangtze River Delta, Neolithic builders used bamboo rollers embedded into ramp surfaces, creating a hybrid system that combined the benefits of inclined planes and rolling logs. Even more remarkably, some ramps may have been temporary yet reusable, constructed from compacted earth and rubble, then dismantled and their materials repurposed as the structure rose, leaving little trace beyond sediment layers detectable through ground-penetrating radar. These ramp systems reveal a universal truth about ancient engineering. Every solution was a dialogue between ambition and limitation. The builders didn't just want to lift stones, they sought to do it with minimal waste, maximum efficiency, and an almost poetic economy of motion. When you look at the Great Pyramid today, you're not just seeing a pile of rocks. You're witnessing the frozen echo of thousands of workers moving in perfect sync, their ramps spiraling upward like the grooves of a gigantic screw, turning brute force into controlled ascent. And somewhere in that silent calculus of slope and sweat, they left us a message. The greatest heights aren't conquered by force, but by patience, planning, and the willingness to take things one careful step at a time. The true engine behind these ancient marvels wasn't just rope or ramps, it was the synchronized effort of countless hands, a symphony of human and animal power working in perfect harmony. Consider the workforce that built the pyramids, not slaves as Hollywood often depicts, but a highly organized labor force of farmers who worked seasonally when the Nile's floods made farming impossible. These were skilled laborers fed with bread and beer from state-run bakeries and breweries, their efforts coordinated with military precision. Tomb paintings show teams hauling statues with ropes over their shoulders, marching in lockstep to the rhythm of overseers' chants, a technique still used today in cultures where collective labor survives, proving its timeless efficiency. But humans weren't alone in this endeavor. Animals played a role just as crucial, though often overlooked. In Mesopotamia, clay tablets describe oxen dragging sledges loaded with stone for ziggurats, their brute strength amplified by clever harness designs that distributed weight evenly. Meanwhile, in the Andes, llamas, though too small to carry heavy blocks, were indispensable for transporting lighter materials like rope, tools, and food across treacherous mountain passes, enabling builders to sustain remote workforces. The real game changer, however, came with the domestication of elephants in South Asia. When the Khmer Empire constructed Angkor Wat, they likely used elephants to position sandstone blocks weighing up to 4 tons, their immense power directed by handlers with an almost telepathic understanding of commands. What set these labor systems apart wasn't just scale, it was their adaptability. The Inca, for instance, mastered the art of modular teamwork. At sites like Machu Picchu, stones were shaped using a technique called keystone cutting, where teams worked on individual sections simultaneously, fitting pieces together like a distributed puzzle. Each worker specialized in a specific task. Some quarried, some polished, some adjusted final placements with nothing but stone hammers and abrasive sand. The precision of their dry stone masonry, where blocks interlock without mortar, speaks to a culture that elevated collaboration to an art form. Modern experiments reveal just how effective these methods were. When archaeologists attempted to recreate the transport of a 1-ton Inca stone using only ropes and log rollers, they found that a coordinated team of 20 could move it nearly 100 yards in under an hour, far faster than expected. The secret: rhythmic pulling. By synchronizing their efforts to a steady beat, workers minimized wasted energy, turning sporadic tugs into a smooth, wave-like motion that kept the stone in near constant movement. This wasn't just muscle, it was applied physics where timing mattered as much as strength. Yet the most remarkable aspect of these labor systems wasn't their physical output, but their social ingenuity. Megalithic projects often doubled as community-building exercises, weaving together disparate groups through shared purpose. Easter Island's moai, for example, may have been moved during ceremonial processions, with rival clans competing to transport their ancestors' statues far, thus transforming back-breaking labor into a sacred ritual. Similarly, Egypt's pyramid towns reveal evidence of medical care for injured workers, suggesting a society that invested in its labor force as much as its monuments. What emerges from these examples is a radical rethinking of primitive technology. These builders didn't just throw bodies at problems, they orchestrated movement with the precision of a conductor, leveraging every available resource, from oxen to elephants, from farmers to craftsmen. Their greatest tool wasn't the lever or the ramp, but the ability to unite thousands under a single vision, proving that human collaboration, when finely tuned, can move mountains, or at least the stones that build them. One of the most overlooked yet brilliant innovations of ancient builders wasn't in moving stones, but in making them want to move. Without synthetic lubricants or ball bearings, they turned to nature's friction-fighting toolkit: wet clay, damp sand, and plant extracts that transformed back-breaking drags into smooth glides. At Egypt's Hatnub quarries, archaeologists found tracks leading to the Great Pyramid's construction site with a peculiar feature: shallow grooves, lined with hardened residues of a clay-water mixture. When researchers recreated this setup, they discovered something remarkable. A sledge loaded with a 1-ton block could be pulled by just a dozen workers on this slick surface, half the force needed on dry ground. The secret: the clay formed a microscopic liquid layer that let the sledge float on a cushion of reduced friction, like a stone skipping across water. But the real surprise came from experiments with sand. While dry sand is abrasive, slightly dampened sand behaves entirely differently. Dutch physicists testing this theory found that the right moisture content creates capillary bridges between grains, tiny water droplets that act like ball bearings, allowing heavy objects to slide with startling ease. This explains why ancient murals show workers pouring liquid ahead of sledges, and why quarries from Giza to Easter Island are littered with crushed seashells. Mixed into the sand, these shells may have served as natural friction modifiers, their smooth fragments further reducing resistance. The effect was so pronounced that moving a 2-ton block on damp sand required less force than pushing a modern refrigerator across a kitchen floor. Yet some of the most sophisticated solutions came from the plant world. In Mesoamerica, builders transporting volcanic stone for temples like Teotihuacan likely used sap from the Castilla elastica tree, a natural latex that, when smeared on log rollers, reduced friction by nearly 40%. Similarly, Polynesian oral traditions describe rubbing taro root on wooden sledges to create a slimy coating, a technique replicated by researchers who found it made moving Easter Island's moai replicas dramatically easier. Even more ingenious was the use of banana leaves in Southeast Asia. Their waxy surface not only lubricated stone paths but left behind organic traces so faint that scientists only detected them through lipid analysis on ancient quarry tools. What unites these methods is their elegant simplicity. Modern engineers might reach for petroleum-based greases or polymer coatings, but ancient builders exploited materials already in their environment, tweaking them through trial and error until they unlocked near magical properties. A handful of wet clay became a makeshift hydroplane. Damp sand morphed into a temporary conveyor belt. Plant secretions turned into biodegradable lubricants. These weren't just tools, they were collaborations with the very landscape these builders sought to transform. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson hidden in these friction-reducing techniques. Sometimes, the most advanced technology isn't something you invent, but something you notice. The story of megalithic engineering isn't just one of flawless triumphs, it's also a record of setbacks, recalculations, and hard-won wisdom. Scattered across the ancient world are abandoned projects and half-finished monuments, each telling a silent tale of trial and error. Nowhere is this more striking than at Aswan's granite quarries in Egypt, where the so-called unfinished obelisk lies like a fossilized blueprint of ambition and adaptation. Carved directly from bedrock, this 1,000-ton colossus was intended to be the tallest obelisk ever erected until a network of cracks forced builders to abandon it mid-construction. What might seem like a failure is actually a goldmine of insight, preserving tool marks and techniques frozen in time. The obelisk's fractured surface reveals meticulous planning. Workers had painstakingly carved trenches around its perimeter, leaving just enough connected rock to stabilize it until final extraction. But the real revelation lies in the mistakes. Deep grooves show where teams adjusted their pounding techniques after hitting weaker stone layers, switching from heavy vertical strikes to gentler diagonal taps to prevent further damage. Nearby, smaller abandoned obelisks display similar adaptations, some with corners deliberately rounded after earlier attempts shattered at sharp angles. These weren't careless errors, they were experiments documented in stone, a hands-on education in material science. Halfway around the world, similar lessons were being carved into the Andes. At Ollantaytambo's quarries, several massive granite blocks were left partially detached after builders encountered unexpected fissures. But instead of discarding these failures, the Inca repurposed them as teaching tools, the stone equivalent of a classroom blackboard. Chisel marks around the floors demonstrate how workers practiced new extraction angles, their strikes growing more confident as they mapped the rock's hidden weaknesses. Even more telling are the transport roads littered with broken megaliths. These weren't merely discarded, their fractures were studied, leading to innovations in load distribution, like carving subtle concave bases that made stones less likely to snap under their own weight during movement. Perhaps the most profound evidence of this iterative process comes from Egypt's bent pyramid at Dosher. Its bizarre change in angle halfway up wasn't an aesthetic choice, it was a course correction. As the structure began showing stress cracks from its original steep incline, builders immediately flattened the slope, creating the distinctive bent profile. The surrounding necropolis tells the rest of the story. Nearby pyramids built afterward all used the gentler angle, proving knowledge wasn't just gained, it was shared. These sites collectively reveal an engineering philosophy far more sophisticated than we often credit. Ancient builders didn't just repeat formulas, they treated each project as a live experiment, embracing failures as data points. The unfinished obelisk's trenches aren't abandoned, they're a message in stone, reminding us that mastery isn't about avoiding mistakes, but learning to read the whispers of stress and strain before they become shouts. Every fracture line, every adjusted angle, is a conversation across millennia, telling us their greatest skill wasn't perfection, it was adaptation. Among the most enigmatic theories about ancient construction is the idea that sound itself might have been a tool, that carefully tuned vibrations could soften stone or levitate massive blocks into place. While this sounds like the stuff of legend, there are tantalizing clues scattered across history and archaeology that suggest our ancestors understood acoustics in ways we're only beginning to grasp. Take the Inca, for example. Their stonework is so precise that not even a razor blade can slide between blocks, yet they left behind no metal tools hard enough to shape granite so flawlessly. Local oral traditions speak of a mythical plant or liquid that could temporarily soften stone, but what if the real secret wasn't a substance, but a frequency? Researchers experimenting with ultrasonic vibrations have shown that certain resonant frequencies can temporarily reduce the hardness of some materials, making them pliable enough to mold by hand. In Peru, where andesite and granite were shaped with uncanny precision, archaeologists have noted that many sacred sites sit atop natural acoustic chambers, caves, or hollows that amplify sound. At the Temple of Huaytara, for instance, chanting or drumming in specific spots creates standing waves strong enough to make water droplets dance on stone surfaces. Could the builders have discovered that these vibrations, when sustained, altered the stone's behavior? Even more intriguing are the so-called ringing rocks, found near megalithic sites worldwide, boulders that produce metallic tones when struck, suggesting ancient artisans might have sought out stone with unique resonant properties. Then there's the legend of the Tibetan monks who allegedly levitated stones with trumpets and drums, described in centuries-old manuscripts. While dismissed as myth for years, a 20th-century Swedish engineer named Henry Kjellson claimed to have witnessed Nepalese priests using a large drum and horn array to lift heavy objects acoustically during a secret ceremony. His account, though controversial, aligns with modern experiments demonstrating how sound waves can create levitation effects in small objects through phased vibrations. Perhaps the most compelling evidence comes from Egypt's Serapeum at Saqqara, where 25-ton granite sarcophagi are housed in underground tunnels with extraordinary acoustic properties. Whispering in one chamber can be heard clearly 50 feet away, and certain frequencies cause the entire space to hum with resonance. French archaeologist André Pochon noted that the sarcophagi's lids, each weighing several tons, show no scrape marks, as if they were placed without dragging. Could harmonic vibrations have momentarily reduced friction, allowing them to slide effortlessly? Of course, skepticism is warranted. No ancient texts explicitly describe acoustic construction methods, and mainstream archaeology largely dismisses these ideas as speculative. But consider this: if such techniques existed, they'd likely have been closely guarded secrets passed down orally among elite builder priests. The absence of written records doesn't disprove their use, it just means the knowledge might have vanished with its keepers. What remains are echoes, megaliths that hum in the wind, stones fitted with impossible precision, and legends too consistent to ignore. Whether these were practical tools or sacred rituals, one thing is clear: the ancient world understood that sound wasn't just for listening. It was a force that could quite literally move mountains. What if the most mind-bending secret of ancient construction wasn't about moving giant stones, but about growing them? The Geopolymer Theory challenges everything we assume about megalithic engineering, suggesting that some of history's most precisely fitted stones might not have been quarried at all, but cast like concrete. This isn't science fiction, it's a hypothesis rooted in chemistry, one that could rewrite our understanding of how monuments like the Great Pyramid were built. At the heart of this idea is a simple but radical premise. Ancient builders may have mastered a form of stone synthesis. Imagine crushing local limestone, mixing it with natron, a naturally occurring salt, and adding water to create a slurry that hardens into a material indistinguishable from natural rock. French materials scientist Joseph Davidovits first proposed this in the 1970s after studying pyramid stones under a microscope. He found something peculiar unlike quarried limestone, which shows clear sedimentary layers. Some pyramid blocks appeared homogenized, with mineral distributions matching reconstituted stone rather than natural bedrock. Even more compelling, fragments contained air bubbles and organic fibers, telltale signs of a poured material. The chemistry checks out. When Davidovits recreated the process using ingredients the Egyptians had, limestone powder, alkaline salts from the Nile shores, and water, he produced a geopolymer that not only matched the pyramid stones in density but weathered identically over decades. This could explain impossibly tight joints between blocks. Rather than grinding stones for a perfect fit, builders might have poured material directly into molds, creating seamless connections as it hardened. Traces of this technique might even hide in plain sight. Hieroglyphs at Luxor's Temple of Karnak depict workers carrying sacks labeled "to build," possibly holding powdered limestone, while ancient texts reference a mysterious white liquid used in construction. But the geopolymer theory isn't without controversy. Mainstream Egyptologists point out that quarry marks at Aswan and Giza clearly show where blocks were extracted, not mixed. Geologists also argue that the pyramid stone's crystalline structure matches natural limestone, though Davidovits counters that prolonged chemical reactions could have restored crystalline patterns over millennia. The debate took an unexpected turn in 2017, when a team analyzing samples from the bent pyramid found traces of opalcite, a mineral that forms under conditions consistent with geopolymer reactions. Beyond Egypt, similar evidence emerges worldwide. Peru's Sacsayhuaman fortress contains stones with surface textures resembling poured material, while Roman concrete, a proven ancient synthetic, shares uncanny similarities with geopolymer recipes. Even more intriguing are India's Vithala temple pillars, carved from a single block yet showing no tool marks, leading some researchers to suggest they were molded like ceramic rather than chiseled. Whether the geopolymer theory holds up or not, it forces us to reconsider ancient ingenuity. If true, it means builders didn't just work with stone, they reinvented it, turning raw earth into precision building materials with a sophistication we're only now beginning to decode. And that raises a haunting question. How many other ancient technologies have we dismissed as impossible, simply because we couldn't imagine them? The perfection of Machu Picchu's stonework isn't just impressive, it's borderline supernatural. How did builders, armed with nothing but stone hammers and abrasive sand, achieve joints so precise that they've withstood earthquakes for centuries without a single crack? The answer lies in a blend of patience, geometry, and an almost obsessive attention to material behavior. Unlike modern construction, where power tools guarantee uniformity, the Inca approached each stone as a unique puzzle piece, shaping it not to arbitrary measurements, but to the exact contours of its neighbor. Start with the raw material. The Inca didn't randomly hack at granite, they listened to it. By tapping stones with smaller rocks, they could detect hidden fissures or weak points, working with the grain rather than against it. This intimate knowledge allowed them to split boulders along natural fracture lines, reducing the need for excessive shaping. But the real magic happened during fitting. Workers would place a roughly shaped block next to its intended partner, then rub the two together with sand as an abrasive. Over days or weeks, this grinding action, a process called bedding in, would gradually wear down high spots until the surfaces mirrored each other perfectly. The result seems so tight that even today you can't slip a sheet of paper between them. What's often overlooked is the role of trial and error. At Ollantaytambo, unfinished walls reveal practice stones left mid-process, their surfaces covered in shallow grooves. These weren't mistakes, they were blueprints. Builders would carve preliminary lines to test fit angles, adjusting their approach based on how the stone responded. Some blocks even have small protrusions left uncarved, likely handles for repositioning during final placement. This iterative process turned construction into a giant 3D jigsaw, where every piece was custom fitted on site rather than prefabricated. The Inca's secret weapon, a simple but brilliant tool called a huara, a wooden template that acted like a stencil for stone. By pressing these frames against partially shaped blocks, workers could identify which areas needed more grinding, ensuring uniformity across irregular surfaces. Modern engineers using laser scans have confirmed something astonishing. The concave bases of many Machu Picchu stones aren't just artistic flourishes, they're structural genius. These subtle curves distribute weight evenly, preventing stress fractures during tremors. Perhaps most humbling is realizing this precision wasn't reserved for sacred sites. Even mundane storage buildings at Machu Picchu feature the same impeccable joints, proving this wasn't just ceremonial craftsmanship, it was standard practice. The stones whisper a truth we're only now appreciating. Perfection doesn't require technology. It demands respect for materials, relentless patience, and the wisdom to know that nature's irregularities aren't obstacles, they're guides. The placement of megaliths wasn't just about brute strength or clever tools, it was a dance with the cosmos itself. Ancient builders didn't merely stack stones, they wove celestial patterns into the very fabric of their monuments, turning rock alignments into a silent language of stars and seasons. Take Stonehenge, where the summer solstice sun rises perfectly over the heel stone, casting its first light into the heart of the circle. This wasn't accidental poetry, it was precision engineering timed to the rhythms of the sky. But Stonehenge is just one verse in a global epic of astronomically aligned architecture. Consider Newgrange in Ireland, a passage tomb older than the pyramids. For 5,000 years, sunlight has pierced its narrow entrance at winter solstice dawn, flooding the inner chamber with golden light for exactly 17 minutes. The precision here is staggering. The passage's roof box aperture was angled to within a fraction of a degree, ensuring this celestial event would repeat annually like clockwork. How did Neolithic builders achieve this without telescopes or written mathematics? The answer lies in patient observation, generations tracking the sun's slow migration across the horizon, marking its extreme northern and southern points with wooden stakes or standing stones. Over centuries, these simple markers evolved into sophisticated solar calendars, etched not on parchment but in the landscape itself. The real genius emerges when we realize these alignments served dual purposes, practical and spiritual. At Chanquillo in Peru, 13 towers stretch across a ridge like a stony comb, their gaps functioning as a solar calendar so accurate it could pinpoint dates within 2 days. But this wasn't just about tracking time for harvests. The tower's shadows created a public spectacle, uniting communities under a shared cosmic rhythm. Similarly, Egypt's Great Pyramid isn't just aligned to true north with minute accuracy, its air shafts target specific stars: Sirius, the Nile flood predictor, and Orion's belt, associated with Osiris. These weren't construction quirks, they were intentional links between earth and sky, ensuring the pharaoh's soul could navigate the heavens. What's often overlooked is how celestial knowledge directly influenced structural stability. At Najdra in Malta, temples built around 3000 BC feature doorways aligned to equinoxes and solstices. But the builders took it further. They positioned massive stone slabs to act as counterweights during seasonal temperature shifts, preventing cracks as the stones expanded and contracted. In Cambodia, Angkor Wat's central tower aligns with the spring equinox sun, while its surrounding moat's water level was calibrated to reflect celestial events, creating a mirror of the night sky. These weren't just symbolic gestures, they were acts of engineering harmony, where cosmic cycles became part of the building's structural logic. The deeper we dig, the clearer it becomes. Ancient engineers didn't separate astronomy from architecture. They saw them as two sides of the same coin. From the sun dagger petroglyphs of Choco Canyon, where shadow and light painted calendars on rock faces, to the serpent-shaped shadow that slithers down El Castillo Pyramid at equinox, these builders were fluent in a language we're still deciphering. Their monuments weren't just built to last, they were built to speak, whispering secrets of the universe in the silent grammar of aligned stones. And perhaps that's their greatest lesson. True engineering doesn't fight nature's rhythms, it listens to them, learns from them, and ultimately dances with them. Moving massive stones required more than physical tools. It demanded something deeper, a force that could unite entire communities under a single purpose. The megaliths of Karnak in France, with their thousands of standing stones arranged in eerie, parallel rows, tell this story vividly. Unlike modern construction projects driven by contracts and deadlines, these ancient endeavors were woven into the very fabric of society, blending engineering with ceremony, labor with devotion. At Karnak, the alignment of over 3,000 stones stretches for miles, a feat that would have required generations of coordinated effort. But what's often overlooked is how these stones weren't just placed, they were celebrated into position. Archaeological evidence suggests that construction phases coincided with seasonal festivals, turning back-breaking labor into sacred acts. Broken pottery and animal bones found near the sites hint at communal feasts, where entire villages gathered to eat, sing, and then lift stones together. Imagine the scene, not just workers but whole families, elders guiding, children watching, everyone invested in a project that transcended individual lifetimes. Ritual wasn't merely symbolic, it was practical psychology. In cultures from Polynesia to Peru, oral traditions describe how chants and rhythms synchronized movement, turning disjointed pulls into fluid, collective force. At Karnak, the repetitive spacing of stones mirrors the cadence of procession, as if each monolith marked a pause in a ceremonial dance. Even the act of selecting stones held spiritual weight. Many megaliths were chosen for their acoustic properties, some ring like bells when struck, suggesting builders sought stones that literally sang, embedding music into the landscape. The spiritual dimension also provided a failsafe for long-term commitment. In societies without written contracts, rituals created binding social contracts. Breton legends speak of stone-walking ceremonies where communities vowed to move megaliths as offerings to ancestral spirits. Failure wasn't just a logistical setback, it was a cosmic imbalance. This mindset transformed projects into covenants, ensuring work continued across decades or even centuries. Karnak's true marvel, then, isn't just its scale, but its social engineering. The stones stand as monuments to a forgotten truth. The most enduring constructions aren't held together by mortar, but by shared belief. When you walk among those silent rows today, you're not just seeing stones, you're hearing the echoes of laughter, chants, and the stubborn faith that when people unite under a purpose, even mountains can be moved. Among the scattered ruins of ancient civilizations lie tantalizing hints of tools and technologies that defy conventional explanation. The vitrified forts of Scotland stand as one of history's most perplexing architectural anomalies, massive stone walls fused together by heat so intense it turned rock into glass. Scientists estimate temperatures exceeding 1,100 degrees Celsius would be required, yet no evidence of furnaces or fuel sources remains. This eerie vitrification wasn't accidental. It follows distinct patterns along strategic defensive points, suggesting purposeful application of a forgotten technique that could liquefy stone on command. Similar mysteries emerge from across the ancient world. In India's Konark Sun Temple, iron beams show metallurgical properties modern science struggles to replicate. Their corrosion resistance, lasting centuries despite monsoons and salty coastal air. Analysis reveals an unknown alloying process, possibly involving plant extracts mentioned in Vedic texts as stone-preserving juices. Even more baffling are the precision-drilled holes in Egypt's Abu Rawash sarcophagus, with spiral grooves so perfectly spaced they suggest rotary tools moving at speeds impossible with manual cranking. The walls of these boreholes bear microscopic striations matching modern diamond-tipped drills, yet diamond mining wasn't recorded in Egypt until millennia later. Theories about these lost technologies range from the plausible to the extraordinary. Some researchers propose the vitrified fort's stone fusion could have been achieved through concentrated sunlight using massive bronze mirrors to focus solar rays, a technique hinted at in Archimedes' legendary heat ray. Others point to ancient descriptions of fire-resistant cloth from Chinese alchemical texts that, when wrapped around stones and set alight, reportedly produced ceramic-like surfaces. Then there's the curious case of the dendera light reliefs in Egypt carvings showing bulb-like objects with snaking filaments, eerily resembling Crookes tubes, an early form of electrical discharge technology. Perhaps most compelling are the tools that vanished without leaving their own remains. The Inca's ability to shape hard granite with nothing but stone hammers remains unsatisfactorily explained unless they possessed some form of sonic fracture technology hinted at in their legends of singing stones. Similarly, Polynesian oral histories describe water knives used to carve moai statues, possibly referencing high-pressure hydraulic techniques similar to modern waterjet cutting. These weren't necessarily high-tech in our sense, but sophisticated applications of natural principles we're still rediscovering. The absence of physical evidence for these tools might not mean they never existed, but that they were made from perishable materials. Bamboo, for instance, can be crafted into surprisingly effective drills when combined with abrasives, as demonstrated by Japanese researchers recreating ancient stone working techniques. Likewise, ropes woven from desert plants could create massive pulley systems leaving little trace after centuries. Even more ephemeral were chemical solutions, like the mysterious stone softening liquid described in multiple ancient texts, possibly derived from plant enzymes that temporarily altered surface hardness. What emerges from these fragments is a humbling realization. Our ancestors' ingenuity may have taken paths we've yet to fully map. The vitrified forts and their enigmatic kin aren't just curiosities. They're challenges to our assumptions, reminding us that history's toolbox was far more diverse than the scraps that survived the ages. Every unexplained anomaly whispers the same question. How many ancient breakthroughs have we mistaken for miracles, simply because their tools turned to dust while their stone creations endured? Ancient builders didn't just adapt to their environments, they collaborated with them, turning geological constraints into creative opportunities. Nowhere is this more apparent than on Easter Island, where the iconic moai statues were carved from compressed volcanic ash called tuff, a stone far softer than granite or basalt. This wasn't a compromise, it was a calculated choice. The island's Rono-Raraku quarry sits atop an extinct volcano, its slopes littered with porous, easily worked rock that allowed artisans to shape massive figures with nothing but basalt hand chisels. But the real ingenuity lay in how they leveraged the material's weaknesses. Tuff's fragility meant it couldn't withstand the pounding techniques used on harder stones elsewhere. Instead, workers drew outlines with sharp tools, then exploited natural fissures to pry out blocks, almost like unzipping the earth itself. Contrast this with the Incas' approach to andesite in the Andes. Far harder than Easter Island's tuff, this volcanic stone required a different strategy. Builders at Sacsayhuaman exploited its granular structure, using hammerstones to peck away crystals along natural fracture lines. The result, precision-fitted walls where irregularly shaped blocks interlock like three-dimensional puzzles. their edges beveled to dissipate seismic energy. What's remarkable is how these techniques emerged independently across continents, proof that ancient engineers shared not a universal method, but a universal mindset. Observe the stone's language, then converse with it on its own terms. Even more extreme adaptations flourished in Egypt's limestone landscapes. Unlike volcanic stone, limestone's sedimentary layers made it ideal for extraction by detachment. Workers at Giza's quarries exploited natural bedding planes, inserting wooden wedges into cracks and soaking them to induce swelling. As the wood expanded, it split the stone along pre-existing weaknesses with surgical precision. Nearby, builders sourcing harder basalt for flooring took a different tack. They followed desert outcrops where temperature swings had already fractured the rock, collecting ready-made slabs that only needed fine-tuning. The lesson transcends mere pragmatism. These builders didn't just use local materials, they thought like them. In Mesopotamia, where clay was abundant but stone scarce, ziggurats rose as baked brick mountains, their cores reinforced with bitumen-soaked reeds for flexibility against earthquakes. Meanwhile, in Ireland's Burren region, Neolithic builders stacked limestone slabs vertically, not because they lacked skill, but because the rock's natural bedding produced plates perfectly sized for dolmen construction. Easter Island's lava-built shrines, Peru's quake-proof andesite forts, Egypt's limestone precision, each reflects a dialogue between human ambition and geological reality. The true marvel isn't just that these cultures worked with what they had, but that they listened to the land's whispered instructions, turning constraints into innovations that still leave us humbled today. Their legacy isn't just in the stones they left behind, but in the quiet truth they teach us. Mastery begins not by forcing nature to obey, but by learning to speak its language. The stones of Newgrange don't just mark a tomb, they capture a moment. For 17 minutes each winter solstice, sunlight pierces the tomb's narrow entrance, creeping down a 60-foot passage to illuminate the inner chamber in a golden glow. This wasn't just architectural poetry, it was a feat of engineering so precise it required generations of celestial observation. The roof box aperture above the entrance wasn't carved at random, it was angled to within a fraction of a degree, filtering sunlight like a cosmic hourglass. But here's what's even more remarkable. The same structure that channeled sunlight also prevented rainwater from flooding the chamber, its corbelled stone roof shedding precipitation as efficiently as modern drainage systems. This marriage of symbolism and function repeats across the ancient world. Egypt's Great Pyramid isn't merely a line to true north. Its descending passage targets the pole star Thuban, which anchored their celestial navigation. Yet this spiritual alignment also served a practical purpose. The narrow shafts acted as ventilation channels, drawing cool air through the pyramid's core to preserve its interior. Similarly, Cambodia's Angkor Wat mirrors the Hindu cosmos in its layout, but its sprawling moats weren't just symbolic oceans. They stabilized the temple's foundation against monsoon floods, while evaporating water created a microclimate that reduced structural cracking in the tropical heat. The Inca took this duality even further. At Machu Picchu, sacred structures like the Intihuatana stone, a ritual sundial, were strategically placed atop fault lines. Modern laser scans revealed these spiritual monuments also functioned as seismic sensors. Subtle shifts in the stone's shadows warned of underground movement long before tremors were felt. Even the temple's famed mortarless masonry served dual roles. The interlocking blocks resisted earthquakes, while their precision symbolized the Inca's harmony with Pachamama, or Mother Earth. Perhaps no culture blended pragmatism and symbolism more vividly than the Maya. Their stepped pyramids weren't just temples, they were acoustic amplifiers. At Chichen Itza, a clap at the base of El Castillo Pyramid produces an echo mimicking the sacred Quetzal bird's cry, a phenomenon caused by precisely spaced staircases acting as sound diffusers. Meanwhile, the temple's alignment casts a serpent-shaped shadow during equinoxes, a spectacle that drew pilgrims and their offerings, while the pyramid's porous limestone core collected rainwater in hidden cisterns below. These examples reveal a profound truth about ancient engineering. Practicality and spirituality weren't competing priorities, they were collaborators. When the builders of Newgrange chiseled that solstice-aligned roof box, they weren't choosing between keeping the tomb dry or sanctifying it with sunlight. They understood that the same stones could whisper to the gods and defy the elements, that true mastery lay not in separating function from meaning, but in weaving them into a single, enduring testament to human ingenuity. Beneath the shadow of towering megaliths lies an overlooked chapter of history, the indispensable role of women in these colossal engineering feats. While popular imagery often depicts teams of male laborers hauling stones under the desert sun, emerging archaeological evidence paints a more inclusive picture. At Çatalhöyük in Turkey, one of the world's oldest proto-cities, skeletal analysis reveals that women's bones bear the same telltale stress markers as men's, thickened arm and shoulder bones from years of heavy lifting and grinding. Nearby, murals show mixed-gender teams carrying construction materials, suggesting labor wasn't divided along rigid gender lines. Even more revealing are the fingerprints preserved in dried mud bricks at Mesopotamian ziggurat sites. Nearly 30% match female handprints, their smaller sizes and distinct ridge patterns frozen in clay for millennia. Ethnographic studies of traditional societies add depth to these findings. In parts of West Africa today, women still lead the production of earthen architecture, mastering the physics of load-bearing structures. Similarly, Nepal's Mustang region sees women hauling stones for dry wall construction using tumplines head straps that distribute weight efficiently, a technique mirrored in pre-Columbian South America. The Inca, too, may have relied on women's expertise in textile engineering. Their massive rope bridges, capable of supporting stone-laden llamas, required intricate weaving techniques traditionally taught to girls from childhood. Could the same hands that spun sturdy suspension cables have also rigged the lifting systems for Sacsayhuaman's granite blocks? The oversight of women's contributions stems partly from modern biases. Early archaeologists often assumed that stone tools equaled male labor, but experimental archaeology tells a different story. When researchers tasked mixed groups with replicating megalith transport using period-accurate methods, they found women frequently devised more efficient techniques, like arranging log rollers in spiral patterns to prevent jamming, or using woven nets to stabilize irregularly shaped stones during lifts. At Britain's Avebury site, excavations revealed a burial of a woman surrounded by antler picks tools used for shaping sarsen stones, her skeletal injuries consistent with a lifetime of stoneworking. Perhaps the most compelling evidence comes from folklore. Breton legends speak of the janed female stone-moving specialists who could sing rocks into alignment using harmonic vibrations. While dismissed as myth, these stories gain credence when compared to living traditions like the Sobadora women of Mexico, who still practice resonant stone-setting techniques passed down through generations. Similarly, Hawaiian oral histories describe priestesses directing the placement of Heiau temples by reading the stone's mana, or spiritual energy, a role blending engineering with sacred geometry. The stones themselves hold clues we're only beginning to decipher. At Malta's Haga Kim Temple, miniature stone models found in what was likely a workshop area show precise architectural details, the kind of scaled planning that would require patience and spatial reasoning, skills historically associated with textile and basket weaving, predominantly female crafts in many ancient societies. Could these models have been teaching tools used by women to train the next generation of builders? What emerges is a radical rethinking of megalithic societies. These weren't male-dominated brute force operations, but collaborative endeavors where every able body and mind contributed. From the fingerprints in Mesopotamian bricks to the stress-fractured bones of Neolithic women, the evidence whispers a truth long drowned out by assumptions. The silent engineers of the ancient world weren't just men. They were mothers, daughters, and innovators whose hands shaped history as surely as they shaped stone. And as we re-examine these monuments with fresh eyes, we're not just uncovering lost techniques, we're restoring half-forgotten faces to the ranks of history's greatest builders. While human ingenuity and teamwork were vital to megalithic construction, ancient builders had another secret workforce at their disposal: animals. Across civilizations, creatures great and small became indispensable partners in moving the unmovable. In Egypt's Luxor temple, a wall carving from the reign of Hatshepsut depicts teams of oxen hauling colossal sandstone obelisks on wooden sledges, their muscles straining against ropes thicker than a man's arm. These weren't artistic exaggerations. Experimental archaeology confirms that a pair of well-trained oxen could pull up to 5 tons on lubricated surfaces, enough to transport most pyramid-casing stones without breaking stride. But the real heavy lifters emerged in South Asia, where elephants became living cranes. A 5th-century Indian text, the Brihat Samhita, details how trained elephants positioned stone pillars using padded harnesses and guided pushes with their foreheads. This wasn't just theoretical. At Cambodia's Angkor Wat, tool marks on sandstone blocks match the gripping patterns of elephant tusks, suggesting they helped pivot stones into place. Even more remarkably, Sri Lanka's Sigiriya frescoes show elephants maneuvering logs beneath raised platforms, their natural understanding of balance making them ideal partners for precise positioning. Not all animal assistants were giants, though. In the Andes, llamas, though unable to carry heavy blocks, formed logistical networks, transporting tools, rope, and food across treacherous mountain passes to remote construction sites like Machu Picchu. Their ability to navigate narrow paths and go days without water made them the ancient equivalent of delivery trucks, sustaining workforces in impossible terrain. Meanwhile, in Mesopotamia, donkeys proved unexpectedly crucial. Cuneiform tablets from Ur describe stone-hauling donkeys, fed special barley rations to boost endurance, their smaller size allowing them to weave through tight quarry spaces where oxen couldn't tread. The brilliance of these animal partnerships lay in their adaptability. Unlike machines, animals could be trained to respond to subtle cues, a skill harnessed in techniques now lost to time. Tamil Nadu's Silappatikaram epic describes elephants adjusting their pulls based on handlers' songs, varying force according to musical pitch. Similarly, Minoan frescoes on Crete show oxen teams moving in zigzag patterns up switchbacks, guided by handlers exploiting the animal's natural tendency to follow the lead bovine's movements, a technique that may explain how Cyclopean stones were transported up steep Greek hillsides. Perhaps most poignant are the unintentional contributions. At Turkey's Göbekli Tepe, fox and crane bones found near quarries hint that these animals may have inspired early engineering solutions. The way cranes counterbalance with outstretched wings could have influenced lever designs, while foxes' habit of digging stable burrows in loose soil might have inspired trenching techniques for stone transport. Even bees played a role. Their wax was likely used to lubricate sled runners in Egypt, a trick still employed by Ethiopian stonemasons today. These collaborations reveal a forgotten truth. Megalithic engineering wasn't a triumph of humans over nature, but a symphony with it. The oxen's steady pull, the elephant's mindful push, the llama's relentless climb, each was a thread in a larger tapestry of interspecies ingenuity. When we marvel at these ancient wonders, we're not just seeing human achievement. We're witnessing the hoofprints, paw marks, and tusks that helped shape history. When we gaze up at the soaring heights of the Great Pyramid or the intricate carvings atop Cambodia's Angkor Wat, there's an invisible element we rarely consider: the temporary forests of scaffolding that once cradled these masterpieces. Unlike the enduring stone below, these wooden skeletons vanished centuries ago, leaving behind only subtle clues about how ancient builders conquered vertical space. At Egypt's Giza Plateau, archaeologists have detected faint impressions in the desert floor, rectangular patterns of compacted sand where massive timber platforms once stood. These weren't just simple ladders, they were sophisticated multi-level workspaces, likely reinforced with palm fiber ropes and fitted with pivoting wooden cranes to maneuver blocks into position. The real stroke of genius, many scaffolds doubled as construction ramps. Paintings in the tomb of Pharaoh Jehutuhotep show workers hauling a colossal statue up a sloping ramp lined with wooden crossbeams, an early form of switchback scaffolding that allowed teams to ascend gradually while maintaining stability. Similar techniques appear in Mesoamerica, where Maya builders at Tikal left telltale post holes in temple walls, evidence of perishable timber frameworks that enabled artists to carve intricate stucco facades dozens of feet above the jungle floor. Even more remarkably, Chinese builders of the Han Dynasty used bamboo scaffolding so advanced that modern Hong Kong skyscraper crews still employ nearly identical techniques today. But wood wasn't the only solution. In Peru's Sacred Valley, Inca builders at Ollantaytambo employed temporary earthen mounds, gigantic sloping piles of compacted soil that allowed workers to haul stones uphill, later removed to reveal freestanding walls. At England's Silbury Hill, the largest prehistoric mound in Europe, researchers found layered chalk and clay that may have served as both ceremonial space and a working platform for nearby stone circle construction. These earthen scaffolds left almost no trace beyond subtle soil composition changes detectable only through ground-penetrating radar. Perhaps the most elegant temporary structures were the Incas' ghost scaffolds, systems of knotted ropes and woven grass nets suspended from above. Spanish chroniclers described seeing workers dangle from these flexible platforms like spiders on silk, adjusting multi-ton stones with nothing but body weight and carefully calculated knots. Modern engineers replicating these techniques found the natural elasticity of iku grass ropes provided built-in shock absorption, preventing catastrophic collapses during seismic activity. The absence of these structures from the archaeological record speaks volumes about ancient priorities. While stone was eternal, scaffolding was meant to be transient, a temporary exoskeleton that dissolved once its purpose was served. Yet their legacy endures in the very monuments they helped birth. Every perfectly placed capstone, every soaring arch, carries the invisible fingerprints of wooden braces and earthen slopes that lifted human ambition skyward before quietly returning to the earth. The absence of metal pulleys in the ancient world didn't stop builders from harnessing their underlying principle, redirecting force through clever rope work. What we might call proto-pulleys weren't intricate wheels and axles, but deceptively simple arrangements of ropes, posts, and levers that multiplied human strength through physics. Picture a team of workers at the base of an Egyptian pyramid, hauling a 2-ton limestone block skyward. Instead of dragging it directly up a ramp, they could have threaded ropes through wooden frames anchored at the ramp's edge. By pulling downward using their full body weight rather than just arm strength, they effectively turned the frame into a force amplifier. This, a change of direction technique, still used by modern riggers, could have doubled or tripled their lifting power with nothing more than sturdy hemp ropes and well-placed timber. Evidence for these systems hides in plain sight. A wall painting in the tomb of Geopolymer shows 172 workers dragging a colossal statue on a sledge, with a figure standing atop the statue pouring liquid likely to reduce friction. But look closer. Ropes extend upward from the sledge to what appears to be a vertical post manned by another worker. Egyptologists like Dr. Coroner Rossi suggest this depicts a vertical pulley system, where the post acted as a pivot to redirect the pull's angle, allowing workers to leverage gravity by hauling downward instead of straining forward. Similar setups appear in Assyrian reliefs, where teams building palaces use what look like rudimentary block and tackle arrangements, with ropes looped over fixed beams to distribute weight. The real breakthrough came when builders combined these redirects with counterweights. At Stonehenge, experiments by University College London revealed that placing a stone slab on a wooden sledge atop log rollers required far less force when the pulling ropes were threaded through upright posts positioned as force multipliers. Adding a counterweight like a basket filled with smaller stones created a primitive but effective hoist. This wasn't just muscle power, it was mechanical advantage achieved through spatial intelligence. The Inca took this further with their quipu ropes, which may have served as calculating tools to determine optimal angles for their massive stone lifts. Knot patterns could have encoded precise measurements for rope lengths and anchor points, turning complex lifts into repeatable formulas. What's often overlooked is how these systems scaled. While a single redirect could double a team's effective strength, linking multiple anchor points created exponential gains. Polynesian oral histories describe ladder lifts for moving Easter Island's moe, where ropes were zigzagged between vertical posts to create a makeshift compound pulley. Even without wheels, this cascading redirection could have allowed small teams to achieve forces rivaling modern cranes. Similarly, Roman builders raising the Pantheon's columns likely employed a Spanish Burton system, a multi-rope arrangement documented in Vitruvius writings where 3 ropes looped through fixed anchors transformed 10 workers' effort into 30 workers' worth of lift. The genius of these proto-pulleys lies in their adaptability. Unlike fixed machinery, rope systems could be reconfigured on the fly. A frayed line could be replaced without stopping work. Anchor points shifted as structures rose higher, and when the project ended, the entire apparatus could be disassembled and reused, leaving no trace beyond faint rope grooves on stones, like those found on the lintels of Mycenae's Lion Gate. These grooves aren't mistakes. They're the ghostly imprints of a forgotten technology that turned fibers and leverage into the hidden muscles of the ancient world. So the next time you see a megalithic wonder, don't just marvel at the stones, look for the invisible threads that lifted them, and the minds that understood how a simple change in direction could move mountains. At the quarries of Ollantaytambo, high in the Peruvian Andes, the granite bears strange scars, blackened surfaces, and jagged fissures that don't match the clean fractures of hammerstones. These are the fingerprints of an ancient technology that harnessed one of nature's most destructive forces, fire. While modern engineers might reach for diamond-tipped saws, the Inca and other megalithic cultures mastered the art of thermal fracturing, using controlled heat to split or shape stone with astonishing precision. The process was deceptively simple yet required intimate knowledge of material science. Builders would light fires directly against the rock face, heating specific areas until the stone glowed red hot. Then, just as the temperature peaked, they doused the flames with water or vinegar, causing rapid thermal contraction. The shock would send cracks racing through the stone along natural grain lines, cleaving boulders with surgical accuracy. At Ollantaytambo, entire cliff faces show this technique in action. Massive granite blocks cleanly separated from bedrock, their edges still bearing the telltale soot marks of their fiery birth. But the real genius lay in the details. Not all stones responded equally. The Inca learned through generations of experimentation that granite, rich in quartz, fractured more predictably than basalt when heated, while limestone could be calcined into powder at lower temperatures for mortar. They also discovered directional fracturing by heating only one side of a stone. They could control the split's path, creating flat surfaces ready for fine-tuning with hammerstones. Modern experiments confirm the efficiency. Thermal fracturing requires 70% less effort than pounding techniques, explaining how Ollantaytambo's builders extracted 100-ton blocks with seemingly impossible precision. The evidence extends beyond Peru. In Japan's Aswa region, archaeologists found stones from ancient tombs with concave fractures matching controlled burn patterns. Irish passage tombs like Newgrange contain stones fractured by heat, their shattered edges later painstakingly smoothed. Even Egypt's Aswan quarries reveal unfinished obelisks with fire-cracked trenches along their bases, suggesting thermal techniques may have supplemented traditional wedge and groove methods. What makes this method so remarkable is its dual nature. Fire wasn't just a tool, but a collaborator. Unlike hammering, which imposed human will upon stone, thermal fracturing worked with the rock's inherent properties, teasing apart its natural weaknesses. The builders weren't just breaking stone, they were conducting a conversation with geology itself, reading the subtle language of heat expansion and crystalline structures. The blackened quarry walls of Ollantaytambo aren't just scars, they're signatures left by craftsmen who understood that sometimes, to move mountains, you must first persuade them to let go. Hidden within the angles of the Great Pyramid and the curves of Stonehenge's lintels lies a silent language, one written not in words but in numbers. Ancient builders didn't just stack stones, they encoded mathematical truths into their designs with a precision that still baffles modern scholars. Take the Great Pyramid's base perimeter, divide it by twice its height, and you get a figure startlingly close to pi 3.1416. This isn't coincidence. It's evidence of a civilization that understood circular geometry long before it was formally defined, embedding the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter into a structure meant to last eternity. But the pyramid's mathematical secrets run deeper. Its sides align with true north, south, east, and west with an error margin of just 3/60ths of a degree, a feat requiring astronomical observation so precise it would demand modern theodolites to replicate. Even more astonishing is how the pyramid's dimensions mirror Earth's geography. Scale its height by 43,200, a number tied to precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis, and you get the planet's polar radius. The builders weren't just constructing a tomb, they were crafting a scale model of the northern hemisphere in stone. Across the Atlantic, the Maya wove mathematics into their cities with equal brilliance. At Chichén Itzá, El Castillo Pyramid's 4 stairways each have 91 steps. Multiply by 4 and add the top platform, 365 the days of the solar year. The structure doubles as a colossal calendar, its shadow at equinoxes slithering like a serpent to mark seasonal transitions. Meanwhile, at Teotihuacan, the Pyramid of the Sun's base perimeter equals the number of days in the Mayan ceremonial calendar, while its orientation 15.5 degrees east of north aligns with the setting of the Pleiades, a star cluster central to their cosmology. The real shock comes when we examine megalithic Europe. At Britain's Avebury, the outer stone circle's circumference divided by the inner circle's diameter yields the golden ratio 1.618, a proportion revered in classical architecture for its aesthetic harmony. Even more striking are the Pythagorean triples found in the dimensions of Scottish stone circles like Callanish. These whole number ratios 3, 4, 5 or 5, 12, 13 form perfect right triangles, proving Neolithic builders understood principles attributed to Pythagoras millennia before his birth. How did cultures separated by oceans and centuries arrive at such similar mathematical insights? The answer may lie in something as simple as ropes and pegs. The Egyptian rope stretchers, surveyors who used knotted cords to measure land, could have generated Pythagorean triples by stretching ropes in 12-unit lengths, marking intervals to create perfect right angles. Similarly, Inca architects used twisted fiber cords called kippers, not just for record-keeping, but possibly for calculating structural loads and angles. These weren't primitive tools in the hands of primitive minds. They were the slide rules of antiquity, capable of complex calculations that shaped the physical world. The most humbling realization: these builders didn't have our abstract number systems. They thought in shapes, in movements, in the tangible relationships between stones and stars. When they laid out a circle, they didn't just count paces, they felt the symmetry in their bones, saw it in the sweep of a stretched rope, heard it in the rhythm of celestial cycles. Their monuments weren't just built with mathematics, they were mathematics made visible, a bridge between earth and sky carved in stone. And as we decode their silent equations, we're not just uncovering ancient knowledge, we're rediscovering a way of seeing the world where numbers weren't separate from life, but woven into its very fabric. In a world without blueprints or textbooks, the greatest engineering secrets traveled not through ink, but through breath and memory. Ancient builders developed sophisticated systems of oral transmission that turned songs, stories, and even dance into living libraries of technical knowledge. Polynesian navigators, for example, memorized star paths and ocean currents through chants called kakai rhythmic verses, encoding sailing directions so precisely they could guide canoes thousands of miles across open water. Similarly, the Inca's master stonemasons trained apprentices through quipu knots and oral formulas, reciting construction sequences in cadences that mirrored the rhythmic tapping of stone hammers. These weren't just mnemonics, they were time capsules of applied physics, preserving the angle of a ramp or the tension of a rope bridge in verses passed down unchanged for centuries. The secret to their accuracy lay in redundancy. Critical techniques were embedded in multiple forms: myths, proverbs, even children's games. West African griots still recount how the great mosque of Djenné's builders sang specific tones to test mortar density, a practice echoed in India's Shilpa Shastras, where Vedic hymns describe ideal mortar mixtures through poetic metaphors comparing consistency to honey dripping from a comb. Meanwhile, Native American oral histories preserved earthquake-resistant building techniques in cautionary tales like the Pacific Northwest's Raven and the Earthquake story, which subtly teaches the importance of flexible corner joints in longhouses. Apprenticeship systems transformed this knowledge into muscle memory. At Egypt's Karnak temple, graffiti shows novice scribes practicing hieroglyphs alongside sketches of pulley systems, evidence of classroom-style knowledge transfer. More remarkably, the medieval guilds of Europe's cathedral builders institutionalized this process through lodges, where master masons taught geometry through hands-on puzzles. A surviving tracing floor in England's York Minster bears grooves where generations of apprentices arranged stone templates, learning complex vaulting angles through tactile repetition rather than mathematical notation. Communal rituals ensured survival beyond individual memory. In Japan's Eye Shrine, rebuilt identically every 20 years for over a millennium, the reconstruction process itself became the teaching tool. Elders would correct deviations from tradition not through scolding, but by initiating mistake dances, ceremonial reenactments of errors and their consequences, embedding lessons in collective consciousness. Similarly, Andean communities still perform harvest dances mimicking the coordinated pulls needed to move megaliths, turning physics into folk art, the true test of these systems. Their resilience, when Spanish chroniclers recorded Inca builders' techniques, they marveled at how workers could precisely recreate structures after disasters not from plans but from shared mental templates. A single elder humming a centuries-old quarrying song might hold the key to splitting a 20-ton block, his melody preserving the exact rhythm of hammer strikes needed to exploit a stone's hidden fault lines. These traditions remind us that engineering isn't just about materials and forces, it's about the fragile, extraordinary human networks that keep wisdom alive across the ages, one carefully remembered word at a time. Experimental archaeology has turned modern researchers into time travelers, donning ancient tools to test whether megalithic methods were myth or reality. One of the most striking experiments unfolded on Easter Island, where a team led by archaeologist Carl Lipo attempted to solve the mystery of the Moais movement. Using a 3-ton replica of the iconic statue, they demonstrated how a simple system of ropes and coordinated rocking could walk the figure upright across the island. Volunteers alternated pulling forward on the statue's base while others stabilized it from behind, mimicking oral traditions that described the moai moving themselves. The experiment wasn't just a success, it revealed an elegant physics trick. By tilting the statue slightly with each pull, the team reduced ground friction by nearly 70%, proving that what seemed supernatural was actually sophisticated biomechanics. Across the Atlantic, another team tackled Egypt's pyramid puzzle. Using sand, wooden sledges, and a replica 2-ton limestone block, physicist Daniel Bond demonstrated how wetting desert sand could cut pulling forces in half. The moisture created capillary bridges between grains, turning the surface into a temporary slipway. But the real breakthrough came when they replicated an ancient wall painting's detail, workers pouring liquid ahead of a sledge. Tests confirmed that the ideal water-to-sand ratio between 2 and 5% made the mixture stiff enough to prevent the sledge from bogging down, yet slippery enough to glide effortlessly. This wasn't just theory, it was a recipe preserved in pigment and stone. Perhaps the most ambitious experiment took shape in rural Oregon, where engineer Mark Lehner and stonemason Roger Hopkins constructed a miniature pyramid using only Bronze Age tools. Over 3 weeks, they quarried limestone with copper chisels, hauled blocks on wooden sledges, and even trial-fitted stones with mud mortar. The project exposed hidden challenges, copper tools dulled after just a few strikes, requiring constant resharpening, while sledges needed precise moisture levels to avoid splitting under load. Yet it also revealed unexpected efficiencies. By carving notches into stone edges, they discovered they could lever blocks into place with astonishing accuracy, a technique later identified in original pyramid stones tool marks. These experiments do more than validate ancient methods, they rewrite assumptions. When researchers at University College London recreated Stonehenge's lintel raising using Neolithic materials, they found that simple frames and counterweights could lift the stones with just 20 people. Similarly, Japanese carpenters rebuilding the Eye's Grand Shrine every 20 years, a tradition spanning 13 centuries, have preserved wooden joinery techniques so precise they withstand earthquakes without nails. Each project peels back layers of mystery, showing that ancient engineering wasn't about secret technology, but about mastering the dialogue between material, environment, and human ingenuity. The true revelation: these methods often outperform modern approaches in unexpected ways. In Peru, attempts to reposition a dislodged Inca stone with cranes failed until locals demonstrated traditional lever and rope techniques, gently nudging it back without damage. Meanwhile, French stonemasons restoring medieval cathedrals have revived long-forgotten lime mortar formulas that self-heal cracks by reacting with rainwater, a property modern cement can't replicate. Experimental archaeology doesn't just illuminate the past, it offers lessons for the future, proving that sometimes the most advanced solution is the one that's been quietly waiting in the stones all along. The contours of the earth itself often served as the first blueprint for ancient builders. At Turkey's Göbekli Tepe, the world's oldest known megalithic site, the entire complex was deliberately nestled into a hillside, its T-shaped pillars aligned with the natural slope to create a seamless transition between architecture and landscape. This wasn't just aesthetic, it was structural genius. By embedding the pillars into the bedrock, builders stabilized them against earthquakes while the surrounding terrain acted as a natural retaining wall, shielding the site from erosive winds. Even the placement of animal carvings on the pillars corresponds to the cardinal directions, suggesting the hill's orientation provided a celestial reference point long before compasses existed. Water, too, whispered guidance to these early engineers. The moai of Easter Island weren't randomly scattered. They were strategically positioned along coastal aquifers where freshwater seeped into the ocean. Recent LiDAR scans revealed hidden tunnels beneath the statues, suggesting they marked access points to vital water sources, turning monolithic sentinels into a sprawling hydration map. Similarly, Cambodia's Angkor Wat sits within an elaborate hydraulic grid, its moats and reservoirs aligned to monsoon patterns. During excavations, archaeologists found ancient sediment layers showing how builders adjusted canal angles over centuries as rainfall patterns shifted, proving their designs evolved alongside the climate. The weather itself became a collaborator. In Scotland's Orkney Islands, the Neolithic village of Skara Brae was built with interconnected stone houses sunk partially underground. This wasn't just for warmth. The subterranean design exploited the thermal mass of the Earth to maintain stable temperatures year-round, while the low profile minimized exposure to North Atlantic gales. Even the famous stone circles of Callanish were positioned to harness natural wind corridors, their layouts creating acoustic pockets that amplified ritual chants against the prevailing winds. Perhaps the most striking example of environmental adaptation comes from Peru's Moray, where the Inca carved concentric terraces into a natural depression. These circular basins create microclimates. Temperature differences between top and bottom levels can exceed 27 degrees Fahrenheit, effectively serving as an agricultural laboratory where crops could be tested at varying elevations without moving them. The builders didn't fight the land's topography. They listened to its gradients, turning a geological quirk into a living seed bank. These sites collectively reveal a profound truth. Megalithic engineering wasn't about conquering nature, but conversing with it. The builders weren't just placing stones. They were reading the land like a language, interpreting its whispers of stability, water flow, and seasonal rhythms. Their monuments weren't imposed upon the earth, but emerged from it, as much a product of their environment as the mountains and rivers themselves. When we stand at these sites today, we're not just seeing human achievement, we're witnessing a dialogue between civilization and planet, carved in stone and etched into the very bones of the landscape. Beneath the shadow of every towering monument, in the dust of quarries and the sweat-drenched paths where stones were hauled, moved the true architects of the ancient world, the unnamed thousands whose hands shaped history. While pharaohs and kings claimed credit, these silent builders left no inscriptions, no grand tombs, just the calluses on their bones and the faintest imprint of their tools. Archaeology is finally revealing their stories. At Giza's worker villages, excavations uncovered not the expected slave quarters, but well-fed communities with medical facilities, fractured limbs set with splints, dental work, even evidence of brain surgery. These weren't conscripted slaves, they were skilled laborers, likely working in rotating crews during the Nile's floods when farming paused, their labor a form of taxed service to the state. The scale of their coordination staggers the modern mind. Building the Great Pyramid alone may have required 15,000 workers over 2 decades, not just muscle but specialists. There were the stone haulers who dragged blocks on lubricated sledges, yes, but also the rope makers weaving cables thick as a man's wrist from papyrus and palm fibers, the path wetters ensuring optimal moisture for sledges, and the angle measurers using palm rib sighting tools to maintain perfect inclines. At Easter Island, pollen analysis reveals workers sustained themselves on cultivated fields of taro and sweet potato, while in Peru, llama caravans kept construction crews at Machu Picchu supplied with dried fish and quinoa from the coast. Women played roles far beyond the stereotypes. Skeletal remains at Çatalhöyük show female arms as muscular as male counterparts from years of grinding pigments for mortar and hauling baskets of rubble. In Egypt, tomb paintings depict women shaping mud bricks, their smaller fingerprints still pressed into dried bricks at Dosha. Even children contributed, not as burdened laborers, but as apprentices. At Stonehenge's quarries, archaeologists found miniature antler picks, training tools for young hands learning to pry stone from earth. The greatest marvel wasn't the stones they moved, but the invisible systems they created. Inca record keepers used knotted quipu cords to track materials and labor shifts with a complexity rivaling modern spreadsheets. At Teotihuacan, foremen organized crews using a base 20 mathematical system evident in the standardized lengths of rope found bundled in workshops. These weren't chaotic mobs, they were precision systems where every role, from the cook preparing energy-rich porridge to the chant leader synchronizing rope pulls, interlaced like gears in a machine. What survives of them, not grand statues, but intimate traces a sandal print in pyramid mortar, a lunch of garlic and onions left uneaten in a quarry, the worn groove on a hammerstone where a thumb rested for decades. These fragments whisper a truth louder than any pharaoh's boast. Monuments endure not because of the mighty who commanded them, but because of the ordinary who built them, stone by stone, step by step, until the impossible became inevitable. Their legacy isn't just in what they raised, but in what they proved, that human collaboration, when carefully woven, can reshape the very earth. Ancient builders achieved the impossible with little more than ropes, ramps, and raw ingenuity, but their greatest legacy might not be the stones they left behind, but the lessons they offer our modern world. As engineers today grapple with climate change and resource scarcity, these time-tested techniques are experiencing an unexpected revival, proving that sometimes the most advanced solutions are those that have quietly endured for millennia. Consider the growing field of biomimicry, where architects study termite mounds to design passive cooling systems, yet the Inca were mastering similar principles 600 years ago at Machu Picchu, shaping stone walls with precisely calculated gaps to allow thermal expansion during earthquakes. Or look at contemporary efforts to reduce concrete's carbon footprint by blending in volcanic ash, a trick the Romans perfected 2,000 years ago in their seawater-resistant harbors, where pozzolanic additives made structures last centuries longer than modern equivalents. The construction industry, responsible for nearly 40% of global CO2 emissions, is now mining ancient methods for sustainable alternatives. In Egypt, researchers have revived the art of lime mortar production after discovering that pyramids' original binders actually grow stronger over time by absorbing carbon dioxide, a self-healing property our quick-setting Portland cement can't replicate. Meanwhile, Japanese engineers collaborating on Tokyo's earthquake-resistant skyscrapers have incorporated principles from the Inca's mortarless masonry, using flexible joints inspired by those interlocking granite blocks that have withstood Andean tremors for centuries. Even something as simple as the Egyptian practice of wetting sand before dragging sledges has inspired new, low-friction construction techniques, reducing fuel consumption in heavy machinery by mimicking that ancient water and sand interface. Perhaps the most transformative revival is happening in water management. The same Qanat systems that sustained Persian cities 3,000 years ago, underground channels that prevent evaporation in arid climates, are being adapted in drought-stricken California and Australia. Spanish architects rebuilding after wildfires have turned to the Moorish acequias of Andalusia, gravity-fed irrigation networks that maintain delicate desert ecosystems while preventing erosion. These aren't nostalgic replicas, they're upgrades. Modern Qanats incorporate sensors to monitor water quality, while 3D printed ceramic linings based on ancient amphora designs reduce seepage losses better than plastic pipes. What makes these ancient solutions so valuable isn't just their sustainability, it's their resilience. Unlike high-tech systems vulnerable to power outages or supply chain disruptions, techniques like the Inca's terraced agriculture or the Romans' self-draining roads function without external inputs. This fail-safe quality has caught the attention of disaster preparedness experts. After Hurricane Maria devastated Puerto Rico's power grid, engineers studying traditional Taino building methods found that their elevated wooden structures and woven palm roofs had survived storms that flattened concrete homes. Now, hybrid designs blending ancient storm-resistant shapes with modern materials are being implemented across the Caribbean. The deepest lesson might be philosophical. Ancient builders worked within ecological boundaries we've only recently begun to respect. The Easter Islanders' eventual deforestation stands as a cautionary tale, but their earlier achievements, like transporting moe with minimal environmental impact, show what's possible when human ambition aligns with natural limits. As we face our own planetary boundaries, their example whispers a radical idea. Progress doesn't always mean inventing anew. Sometimes it means remembering. The silent engineers of the past left more than monuments. They left a blueprint for building in harmony with the earth, written in stones that have weathered millennia. Our challenge isn't just to admire their work, but to let it reshape our imagination of what's possible. From levers to sound waves, the silent engineers of the megaliths left behind a legacy of ingenuity that still baffles us today. Their tools without teeth, ramps that defied gravity, ropes that multiplied strength, and stones that sang in harmony with the earth were no less effective than modern machinery. They were simply a testament to a different kind of genius, one that listened to the whispers of nature rather than forcing it into submission. Take the humble lever, for instance. While we might rely on cranes and hydraulics, ancient builders turned a simple wooden beam into a force multiplier capable of lifting stones heavier than elephants. Or consider the Inca's frictionless stone joints, shaped not by power tools but by patient abrasion, their precision so exact that they've withstood centuries of earthquakes. Even the most speculative theories like acoustic levitation or stone softening plants challenge us to rethink what's possible with nothing but observation, experimentation, and an intimate dialogue with materials. What's truly remarkable isn't just what these builders achieved, but how they did it. Without blueprints or calculators, they encoded celestial alignments into their monuments, turning pyramids into calendars and stone circles into astronomical observatories. They transformed water into a collaborator, using its buoyancy to move the unmovable and its capillary action to reduce friction. And perhaps most inspiring of all, they built communities around these projects, turning back-breaking labor into collective rituals that bound societies together. The lessons here aren't just historical curiosities, they're urgent reminders for our own age of excess. In a world grappling with climate change and resource scarcity, the megalithic builders' respect for materials, their waste-free techniques, and their ability to work with nature rather than against it feel more relevant than ever. Imagine modern construction embracing the Inca's mortarless masonry, eliminating the carbon footprint of cement, or adopting Egypt's ramp systems, where temporary structures left no trace beyond the monuments they helped create. As we peel back the layers of these ancient secrets, we're not just uncovering the past, we're rediscovering a lost art of problem-solving, one that values patience over speed, adaptation over force, and harmony over domination. So the next time you stand before one of these ancient wonders, don't just marvel at its scale. Listen to the stories hidden in its stones, the echoes of ropes straining, hammers tapping, and generations of builders whispering across time. Their legacy isn't just in what they left behind, but in the questions they force us to ask. What could we achieve if we stopped fighting the world and started learning from it? If this journey into the minds of ancient engineers sparked your curiosity, don't forget to like and subscribe for more untold stories of human ingenuity. And drop a comment below what's the most surprising or inspiring technique you discovered today. Was it the water-lubricated sledges, the celestial alignments, or something else entirely? Let's keep the conversation going, just as these builders kept passing their knowledge down through the ages, one stone, one idea,